Hello and welcome to this meeting of the Tamworth and Lichfield Joint Waste Committee on the 21st of November 2022. I will bring us to the first item on the agenda, which is the appointment of a chair for the remainder of the municipal year. Do I have any nominations?
I nominate Councillor Doyle.
Any seconds for that?
I second that one.
And that is carried. Councillor Doyle, I will hand the meeting over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. Second item, apologies for absence. I've got apologies for Jeremy Oates. I believe everybody else is here. Okie doke. So move on to the third item, declarations of interest. Anybody interested?
Chair, it's not a declaration of interest, but I wonder if I might take this opportunity to ask if we could change the agenda item, the running order of the items, if that would be okay. I just wonder whether or not the joint waste service projects might fit more smoothly alongside the business planning, given that it is forward thinking as well. So if we did Christmas catch up, followed by the dual stream update, and then perhaps the joint waste service projects, if that's okay with you.
I'm feeling generous.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Minutes from the previous meeting. I don't believe I was here for that one.
Yeah, I was here. I'm fine with them.
Okay. Do we move and second the minutes? Oh. Usually we do.
Sure. Yeah. Move them.
Okay, we'll just skip over that one. Okay, and fifth item on the agenda, Christmas catch-up plan.
I was going to take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. So in the attached reports, we've gone through and explained how we propose to deliver the service through the Christmas period. It's all encapsulated in the report. I think I might just throw it over to questions, if that's okay, Chair, rather than go through it. It's going, encapsulated there.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. I am a little bit concerned that obviously that there is. I'm aware that Saturday the 31st obviously is a short day with it being New Year's Eve. And if obviously the round that will be a Lichfield round is not collected on that day, obviously, and that there's no collections on Monday the 2nd, that leaves Lichfield residents waiting 17-18 days for the recycling to be collected over the Christmas period. So the plan is that if we don't get all the services completed on Saturday the 31st, are we going to be doing some collections on the Monday, as Nigel has already intimated to myself in a meeting previously?
Yeah, thank you. So we have got members of staff on standby and ready to work on Monday if that's required. That's something that he's put in place. That obviously comes with the related overtime and pay, but there is additional support that he's sought from the tipping sites as well, which have agreed to stay open slightly longer, from what I understand. And also he has come up with a solution that relates to being able to tip off first thing on the Tuesday morning. So they will still be able to finish the collection on the Saturday, but not necessarily tip off. Then they go and tip off on the Tuesday and then, go on with their normal route. So we have we've planned therefore a few contingencies should that unlikely event of not finishing on Saturday occur.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Just the generic one, Chair. It's more about governance, I suppose, rather than the contents of the actual report. Just my concern is we're presented with one option as I'm reading it for Christmas collection catch up. There is no alternative in front of us, so the only options we have are approve it, which means great, it all goes ahead, or not approve it, which kind of throws us into chaos, considering we're 3 weeks away from Christmas. So I think when we're bringing things to Joint Waste Board, we either need to have options or decisions. We can't just be asked to approve a sole option, because that just doesn't. To me, it just feels like, what's the point of having a meeting if we just come in to rubber stamp one singular option? We either have choices to make, in which case, brilliant, bring it here. If there aren't any options or any decisions to make, don't bring it to a board for a decision where there is only one decision. I suppose that's collectively for all of us to have a think about how we manage that. That's it, just a mind.
Okay. Any further questions?
Just a point of sort of accuracy, I think, on the comms plan. There's reference of Tamworth district, it should be Tamworth borough.
Okay,
So it's just a point of accuracy.
That's to make up for all the times we get called Lichfield Borough.
Okay, if there's no further questions, can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Or move and somebody second?
I'll second it.
All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Right, next item on the agenda, dual stream recycling service update and performance data.
thank you, Chair. So again, the report is attached and I'd just like to open it to questions, please.
Does anybody want to ask me questions? Look, yeah. Just.
Oh, is it me?
I didn't know.
Thanks. So just a couple of quick ones and then I'll probably get into a few more later on. But in terms of we're at 8.8 crews a day at the moment, we're budgeted for 8.5. Do we know how quickly we're going to get down to the 8.5 that we've budgeted for? Because obviously we can only use reserves once. So just wondering at what sort of speed we're moving towards getting down to 8.5. And then the other question was around something which has just escaped my mind. So I'll let you answer that question and then I'll remember my second one.
Yeah, thanks. So I actually met with the team today to have a look at their resourcing. We have got a proposal where I can rejuggle the existing resources, structure them slightly differently to enable the capacity to review the current rounds. It's one of my key priorities whilst I'm here to reduce that additional unexpected spend. So in terms of a timeline, I have literally tasked them today that is a priority that they have to drive through. Obviously, they have to run that at the same time as Christmas. I would like to have a very robust solution by January.
Brilliant, thank you. That's fine. And then so the other question was around the rejected bins that we've got at the moment. So we're plateauing at 1.2% of households, 430 bins a week. When we say we're proposing to write to each property again, offering advice, so are the crews recording which properties are having bins rejected on a weekly basis, and do we have that granular level of detail, or would it involve writing to every single household, reminding them, or are we able to focus on the ones that are not doing it?
No, it would be at a granular level. So if the proposal is to write letters, it would be directly to those specific households.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank you. Doug's nicked two of my questions.
Right.
Obviously it's a bit disappointing to see that the recycling performance isn't where we'd anticipated it to be. You know, obviously we anticipate the next 2 quarters to see what that is like. But I was wondering how the team plan to tackle that. I'm aware that the public are not you know, in favour of the current modes of collection. And I think people have started to recycle less and put more in their perhaps in their black bins. And I know Tetra Packs is an issue, but that's something that we can't control. But I was wondering what the team's plans are to get that recycling rate back to where it should be and back, you know, and do better than we did prior to the rollout of the dual stream.
Yeah, thanks. So contamination rates aren't where we'd like them to be. I think the first quarter they were approximately slightly higher than 8%. They have dropped down considerably in the second quarter, down to 2.8%. So obviously I think that reflects the adjustment that the communities had to go through. But the target is 1%, so there's still a lot more to be done. I think that there is a great opportunity to run a civic campaign raising the awareness of recycling, and obviously not just that it's good for the environment, but actually the benefits that recycling provides to the council and the contributions that residents are actually making by providing that recycling material, thus the importance of making sure we put it in the right bin. I think there's a lot of really positive messaging that we could take out. That's not something that I understand the council's done to date, and I think it'd be a great way to engage the community in a lot more of a positive space about recycling and run the campaign. We could even go as far as engaging schools. We could go far as looking at different rounds and measuring and publishing the data that we have. We have some great data in the service that we don't really use to its full advantage. So publishing data around who's, you know, which rounds are going really well, create almost like a little, I don't want to use competition, but a community spirit around making progress in recycling and people seeing how well they're performing and the contribution that they're making to the council as a result. That's a sort of way we can really position this in a positive way. And that's something I'd like to take to the council and work with the staff, the officers to run.
I mean, I agree. You know, we obviously we do need to do something. I mean, touching on the data point, it was obviously when we came to ONS with the report last week, and obviously it was one of the key issues was the data within the service. Is that the data's there, but it's just, you know, it's not in any useful format. You know, when you ask for data, it takes weeks to get the data because it's got to be manipulated. So, you know, if you can get that data out, that would be fantastic, because I've been asking for that for several months, and I know Councillor Doyle has as well. So, you know, and I'm more than happy to obviously support a campaign that we can obviously to encourage the residents to recycle more based on, you know, the data that we've got. But I've always been led to believe that we can't get the data. So, you know, yeah, happy to support that, because we do need to increase the recycling levels. We do need to obviously get the public back on board. I think there's a lot of negativity out there, and it's, you know, we started a journey, and I think we've forgotten to take them with us, and I think we now need to get back on that journey and get them back on the bus with us.
Any further questions?
If I may, Chair, just I'm quite interested in the fact that residual tonnage is considerably lower than previous. In fact, I believe it's, you know, pre-pandemic levels, which is interesting. I think we probably need to understand that a little bit more, because that's our sort of target market for recyclables. If that's reducing, then our recycling tonnage is going to reduce, not percentage, the tonnage, and that's directly sort of direct correlation for our income. So I think we need to be sort of quite. It's great if residual is reducing, because that means people are throwing less away. It will be the first, I think, if that is actually the case. But something is happening to the residual that we perhaps need to understand.
Yeah, so I have questioned this as well. So total tonnage is decreased compared to last year. I have questioned that. I'm told that is in line with national figures. I'm told that's also in line with what's going on across Staffordshire in general, according to the Joint Staffordshire Waste Partnership and the discussions that are happening at an officer level. So other than to tell you that apparently it's a national trend, I do agree that that's something we need to look into.
I'd just like to make a comment. I agree with you. I've actually read some of the articles as well that say this is a general national trend in the amount reducing, but I think we should look to better understand what's happening in our own backyard as well. Thank you. Councillor Paul.
If I may, thank you, Chair. So we've got in the final paragraph, it tells us that our current forecast is to break even at the end of the year in terms of the Joint Waste Service budget. In preceding paragraphs, it tells us that our gate fees to year are slightly under budget, so we're paying less to drop our dry recycler off. It tells us that our recycling credit is slightly higher than we've budgeted for, and it tells us that the income from our dry recycler has already exceeded, in the first 2 quarters, has exceeded the entire annual budget. So do we not think that forecast to break even is slightly pessimistic, given that we're at end of H1, we've already exceeded our income from the dry recycler for the entire year, and our other expenditure is slightly below forecast. And I suppose the natural sort of follow on from that question is, if we are being pessimistic, is there any headroom in here for us to actually focus more on perhaps additional recycling officers, for instance, to help drive those figures down further from the 1.2%, even lower?
Can I take that, Chair?
Oh,
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do think it is a very conservative estimate in terms of how we're forecasting towards the end of the year. And I also think that one of the things I've asked Shana to have a look at on behalf of the Joint Waste Service is to understand where we genuinely are profiling our end of year budget to come in. That means, as you say, Leader, that if there is some headspace there, then we should be proactive about trying to tackle the things that are important to us, and recycling is clearly, and the level of recycling is clearly important to us. So I guess through you, Chair, if I may, I'll ask Shana if you can bring that offline, obviously electronically, to this group as quickly as we can.
Brilliant. That's good. And that was just a suggestion of where we could spend the money, and of course not where we must spend the money, but it's an idea.
Councillor Little.
Thank you. Just another quick question on the households of HMOs, etc. That obviously we're still on Comey Gold, and the trade waste service that still exists within Lichfield. When is the target to obviously to move all of those onto the dual stream system that the rest of our residents are on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you. On the HMO side of things, I'm meeting with the officer who's leading the project tomorrow. I've got a 2-hour workshop planned with him to really understand how he's rolling out that project. He's making progress, but it requires him to basically attend every single property and sort of do an assessment. I would like to explore if there are ways that we can work with perhaps housing colleagues and such that we can fasten that. So I haven't got a direct answer for you other than to say it's something actually prioritising tomorrow. I'm more than happy to come back to you offline with some more substantive dates. The second question was, sorry?
The trade waste service that is also we still offer commingled on that service.
Yeah, so if that sort of leaks into item number 3, but that is one of the projects that we have identified as something that we need to look into to actually consider whether that is a substantive service that the Joint Waste Service will want to take forward. There is some analysis that needs to be done on the cost effectiveness of running that service at the moment, and that's what we're about to commence.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, so I'll move the report. Does somebody want to second it?
I'll second it, Chairman.
So nice to meet you. All in favour? Thank you. That now brings us on to the Joint Waste Service project.
I'll do a brief intro to that, Chair, if that's okay.
Sure.
So obviously the initial rollout of the new dual stream recycling service had some challenges, I think it's fair to say, and we've sought to address over the last few months or so. But actually at the time of that rollout and the way that the service reacted, sometimes positively, quite often not so positively in terms of the way that we did on how we managed on a day-to-day basis, that led me to have a conversation with Andrew as well about actually how is the service performing overall? What do the service priorities need to be over the sort of the next few months, next couple of years? And that's what this item is intended to hopefully provoke, I suppose, in terms of a discussion about that. We put forward a proposal, How's Little and I have talked about this from our side, but we put forward a proposal with some key priorities for the service. And it would be great to get some feedback from the joint board, please, to see whether or not they are the right things to be focusing on over the right time frame. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any questions? Councillor Fuller?
I suppose a natural question for me is if all those boxes there were whatever shade of peach the in progress colour should be, do we have adequate resource and adequately skilled resource to be addressing all of those at the same time, or are some of them naturally going to be delayed because we don't have the necessary resource to actually consume that amount of work in one challenge? So I'm not necessarily questioning the specific line items. I'm just questioning whether we've got capacity and expertise to address, whether we've got sufficient bandwidth, I guess, as an organisation.
And I think that's a very reasonable question, Chair. So again, Andrew and I have talked about how we can bring some strategic capacity and capability into the service as well to help us with some of these. Shana being in post for the next few months or so is certainly part of that additional strategic capacity. And Shana can look at some of the future operating model type objectives and things, but I've forgotten the guy's name now. Stephen Foster,
Yeah.
who recently undertook the review of the rollout of the dual stream recycling service, is helping to identify some additional strategic capacity to help us move forward on a number of these lines together. So, for example, they're talking about looking at the round review, because I realised that the way that we rolled out the round review last time perhaps knocked confidence both of this board and some of our residents as well. So, looking at the round review, the future of food waste, and I can't remember the other ones. Shana, do you remember offhand?
The delivery model, and the commercial waste service.
Commercial waste. Obviously, commercial waste is a Lichfield only issue, but so that additional strategic capacity is being brought in now as we speak.
And then the only other one, Chairman, is the and you might tell me it is buried in one of these line items, but in terms of the depot or the potential issue of the future depot arrangements, is that going to follow on from fleet / delivery rounds, etc., rather than appear as a specific line item here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, once we've decided what is the right operating model for the service, and I believe all options are on the table at the moment, and again, it'd be helpful to have a conversation about that potentially. But actually that, followed by what we would like to do with food, etc., will determine whether or not we need to worry about our depot side.
Just on obviously on the operating model, I think it was 2019, 2018, 29 that Frith did was it 2019? Did a report on obviously operating models when we were looking at dual stream and food waste, and I do think it's something that we really need to look into again. Food waste is not going to go away. We're going to be obviously forced to do it. As Wales, its law is from January, so we will get obviously have to do food waste, and yeah, we need to look at whether it's a hybrid model. Whatever we look at, I think all options do need to be on the table for us to look into those.
Just worth touching on food waste. There was a little bit in the autumn statement, which was a little bit of a comfort blanket for us, because it said new burdens will cover all costs associated. Now, you can take that with a slight pinch of salt as to what all means, but it was in a positive sense rather than beforehand it's been quite weak. So, but it's a sign that it is coming, and I think it will come down the line fairly quickly once it gets enshrined in more legislation.
Right, Jay, if I may ask Mr. Barrett a question about that. Does that imply also, Andrew, that the potential, the likelihood or the rumour of garden waste becoming a free to use service is unlikely to happen, given, or that burden of the cost of that service is unlikely to be pushed onto local authorities as well?
I have read somewhere that it was unlikely to be pursued,
Right.
But I've seen nothing concrete as yet. But I think, yeah, it probably goes without saying it would be too big an ask, wouldn't it?
Sorry, just different things people are saying, just triggering different things. So obviously, we've got the deposit return scheme that obviously goes live in Scotland, haven't we? Or if that then becomes law within England, that will have a significant effect on our recycling credit. And what service that model we are going to offer our residents. I just think we need to have that perhaps on the back of our mind somewhere when we're looking at all these. I understand there's a lot of balls juggling in the air at the moment, but there's significant changes for this service over the next 18 to 24 months.
Yes, there definitely is, especially with the food recycling.
Probably just worth saying that we're in quite a good place with now being quality dual stream, because at least our paper and card is of exceptional quality. I think we've seen that earlier. So that is commanding a good price at this moment in time. On the deposit return, we would likely lose the weight of the glass and potentially cans, certainly aluminium cans to some extent. But at least we've got the sort of like the start of quality paper to rely on as far as sort of income's concerned, which would be helpful.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I guess for me, timescales really. Obviously, I don't want to hold anybody to things, but when can we see obviously some of these projects? Yeah.
So I will attempt to answer that, Chair. I think for me, the critical piece on this plan is the fleet review. And we have a deadline, you know, if we don't have the clarity over what we'd like to do with the fleet by March next year, then I think we're at considerable risk, I suppose, in terms of the potential to procure a new fleet, replace a new fleet within time, sort of thing. So working backwards from there, we need to understand what the operating model is going to look like before we can determine what we want to do with the fleet. We need to understand what we want to do with food waste before we can determine what we want to do with the fleet. So if March is the cut-off point for fleet, then I'll talk to Andrew and to Shana and set some time frames for each of those individual pieces of work between now and then. If it's okay.
Any further comments or questions? No? Okay.
I'll move this one. Somebody second it. All in favour? And the last one, business planning.
Last one's business planning.
That's what we just.
Oh, right.
I think that's, yeah, I think that's meant to be the same as previous items, is it? Unless there's something separate.
Is it?
I'm not sure what the discussion is to be.
The discussion was just that, what we just
Okay.
had.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well, in that case.
Can I bring up a point on something if possible? I suppose for me, what when Stephen Foster did his report a few months ago, he mentioned obviously the governance surrounding this committee. I just wondered whether we could have a discussion on what that looks like and how we see that moving forward. And yeah, is that possible, Chair?
I second that proposal is.
This is how I'm outnumbered.
Well, I mean, for me, it seems to be more of an operational committee. And I guess we need to look at the governance and how those decisions are made. And that was the key thing that Stephen Foster said, that there didn't seem to be any governance following those decisions that we made around the dual stream. Obviously, I wasn't privy to those decisions at the time, so I'm not aware. But obviously, is it possible for you, the officers, to go away and look at how this committee would function going forward, and we look at perhaps some new guiding principles? I don't know.
I'm happy to support that one.
I think from our perspective, it fully agree with Liz. I think there's some things here which are operational. I think that causes probably frustration on, well, I say both sides, but from an officer perspective as well as a member perspective, because actually it drags members into some operational detail, which perhaps is slightly too operational, and that of course some friction. And actually, I think if we can get ourselves back up to that proper horizon scanning strategic level here as a board, the work can go and be done at the operational level and to go and make that happen. And we'll probably just realign members and officers with their respective responsibilities, should I say. And I think that'd be really useful perhaps if we take that away and maybe come up with some recommendations for the next joint waste board. I think my only other, and Will knows all my gripes, that I would love to have some member input into the agenda of this meeting. I think that the agenda was put together, no one's fault, but with the lack of chairman, the agenda sort of spawned and is in front of us. I think it'd be really helpful for us to make sure that there's some member involvement in what's coming forward to the joint waste board and what's being discussed here. So I suppose that's on you now, Chair, if you've been elected. Have you just been elected for the coming year? Is that how it was? Brilliant. Fantastic. All on Councillor Doyle.
Councillor,
Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, if we cast our minds back to when the service was set up, I think I'm quite lonely because I'm the only person who was here at the time. The only way of doing what both authorities wanted to do was via a constitution, which is why this is a formal committee. Since then, there's been other practices within our authorities, on site the building control partnership, which is much wider than this, where they use a management board. And that allows for member oversight on the work and on task, whilst also getting the job done, which I think is probably more sensible as an approach. What we would have to do is to understand whether we can rejig the constitution of this committee and the service to accommodate that. But, you know, a lot of things have changed in since 2010, I think it was. So I'm sure there's a lawful way around this.
Sorry, Shane, I would fully endorse perhaps working that up and bringing it back to the next joint waste board for our discussion. If that's okay. I think, as you say, Mr. Barrett, that it feels like it was of its time and served a very useful purpose, but I think we've just continued it without actually perhaps revisiting whether it still serves a purpose for which it was originally intended.
I'm here for actually been to two of these meetings. But I endorse that. Wholeheartedly.
Brilliant.
Without any other business to discuss, I guess that's the meeting closed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for attending.